Hi folks, welcome back to another video. So, a couple of videos back I painted up this guy, which is 3030 from Bravestarr, that old 80s cartoon that I'm probably one of the only people on the planet that still remember it. Well, me and the person who sculpted this at least. So, in this video what we're going to be doing is painting up the rest of the gang. This was actually part of a 3-person diorama, hence why he's not actually on a base or anything. So, let's get started. So the next model I'm going to add to the diorama is Deputy Fuzz. Now, I've printed him out hollow, so he's quite a sort of chunky figure, but yeah, he's nice and hollow, so he's not too heavy. I say he's hollow, I did make the arms all solid. So I've glued them all together. What I have done is I've left the head and the hat separate, just to make it a bit easier for painting. He's a pretty simple character really, not a huge amount of detail on him, so hopefully he should be relatively easy to paint, straightforward. As I say, the head is separate and also the hat, it's quite a tight fit in there at the moment, but I promise you that is separate. Okay, so let's start working on this guy. I'm going to start with the biggest piece. I'm going to start with the body and start getting some paint down. So I've got a stick through the neck just to make it a bit easier to hold as I'm painting. So what I'm going to do now is take some maroon brown, or Gorgon brown, excuse me, from Vallejo Paints. This is quite a thin brown, so I'm likely to need at least 2 coats, possibly 3, to get proper coverage. You can see already how thinly it's going on. But that's okay, it just means we've got to take a bit more time to get these coats applied. For the hat, I'm going to take some Mornfang brown, which is a nice mid-tone brown, and with a bit of watered down paint mix, go around the whole thing. Next, what I've done, I've added a little bit of Steel Legion Drab, so a lighter brown, into the mix, or the original mix of the Mornfang brown. And what I'm sort of done is just kind of do a dry brush effect. Make sure you've got enough of the paint off, and then yeah, just basically kind of circle around the whole thing, catch the edges. And what that does is it makes the hat look a little bit worn. It looks more sort of a weathered sort of leather kind of look. It's subtle, but it just does a little bit more, makes it a little bit more interesting rather than having a flat colour. So I'm just going to go around the whole hat like this, and then we'll come back. Okay, so after I've done that weathering, what I'm going to do now is use some black and just paint in this stripe that goes around the hat. And then finally I'm going to use some Runefang Steel, which is a nice bright silver paint, to go over the badge here. Again, this is quite a thin paint, so it's going to take a couple of coats. So for his skin, if that's what it is, it might be fur, I'm not sure. I'm going to use some Baylor Brown, which is a very light brown. Again, theme of the day, very thin paint this one. So going to take at least 2 coats, if not 3, but just make sure that you put it on nice and evenly. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is mix some Parasite Brown with some Rust. So basically I'm making a orangey brown colour, and once that's thinned down, that's going to go over the beard. Now, as you can see, this is fairly thin, so once again we'll need a couple of coats on that. Next we're going to put in some Corax White and block in the eyes and the teeth. And then it's taking some black of your choice and doing in the nails on the hands and on the toes as well. So off camera I've also used some black to dot in the eyes and do a couple of lines around the face, around the beard there. I also just did a quick dry brush across the beard of a slightly lighter orange, just because I felt it looked a little bit dull without that. So I think that's pretty much him done. So if I just pop his hat on, we can sort of see the final look. Pop his head onto the body. And there we are. So I'm going to glue that in place, and then I'm going to start work on the base. Next up, I'm going to start working on the base. So this is the base put together. I've done some pre-work on it already. Essentially, it was two parts which had to be glued together. So unfortunately, there is a little bit of a seam here, despite my best efforts to fill in that gap. I did actually have to do a little bit of rework on it as well. So originally there was a peg here and a peg there for the two different characters, but the pegs were too close together. The actual feet were on top of each other. So it was actually a bit of an error on the sculptor's part there. So what I've done, there was a post here that I have taken out, and there was a post here which I've also taken out, and I have resculpted on top of that using some polyfiller. Next thing I did is spray the whole thing with a couple of primers, so grey over the whole thing, and then I went with Chaos Black around the rim, so just to essentially save me from having to paint that in by hand later. I then varnished it, so to protect this black outline. And then on the bottom, I have placed a piece of sticky back plastic, essentially, which gives this marble effect, and then put a couple of these sort of furniture pads down. Now, what that does is it stabilizes the model, so there's no rock at all. There was a slight rock with this because, as I said, it was two pieces joined together. So, with the best will in the world, they're never going to go perfectly together. So, putting a couple of pads under the model always properly supports it. So next up then, I'm going to start trying to paint this up. It's going to be pretty simple stuff really. There's not a lot of detail to it. It's essentially just sand and a few rocks. So for the big part, the sand, I'm going to start with some more cast bone. So I'm going to take my fairly wide flat brush to cover over the whole part as quickly as I can. When I come up to the edges around where the black meets the rim of the base, I'm going to obviously come in with a smaller brush to make sure that I don't go over on that black. Next, I'm taking some Parasite Brown and I'm applying that over to the rocks. That's then followed up with an all-over wash of Seraphim Sepia. And then a brown wash, Agrax Earthshade, over the rocks. And then back to that original Morecast bone to do a dry brush across all the sand. Next I'm going to do a dry brush of Baylor Brown, and that's going to be over all the rocks. Now the last little thing is this ram head skull, which I have painted off camera. So that just slots into there and the base is done. And here is Deputy Fuzz, and he's all on the base there. Now I've also brought in 3030. Now I painted him in a separate video, so you can go back and look at that if you want to. So you can see there's two posts left over. That's for Bravestarr to stand in the middle to complete the diorama. I was originally just going to leave this video here with Fuzz and the base, but that's not a particularly interesting video. So I'm going to now just get this thing done. I'm going to carry on, do Bravestarr, and we'll get this thing finished. So here is Bravestarr. Now obviously I've put him together and I have primed him. He is still in two parts just to keep it easier for painting, but everything else has been glued into place. It came out all pretty straightforward. The only trouble is, it's one of those models where the designer has decided to put a cut right across the neck. Really poor place to put it when you could have just inverted it into the collar, but anyway. So obviously there was a big gap there once I glued the head on. I've done my best. Well, I say I've done my best. I've attempted to fill in the gap. I should probably sand it down a bit and sort of go in for a second attempt. But I don't really think I can be bothered, to be quite honest. It's not my best work, but I'm hoping that kind of the way it's positioned, the brim of the hat kind of casts a bit of shadow across the face anyway. So I'm hoping we can get away with it a little bit. Bravestar's skin is a darker tone anyway, so hopefully that might hide it. If it looks really, really awful, then I'll come back and redo it. But otherwise, I'm just going to carry on. Okay, so Let's start with, now Bravestarr annoyingly is mostly shades of yellow, and anyone who paints will know yellow is the worst colour to try and paint with. So I will figure out what shade of yellow to go with. Got to put the thinking cap on. Now, my plan was to start with Avalon Sunset. Now, I've got two brand new pots. I say brand new, I've had them for a couple of years, but they've never been opened. And both of them are beyond use, unfortunately. They've both dried up into a squidgy, horrible mess. That's not what paint should look like. And that's after I've tried mixing them. So they're not really salvageable, but what I'm going to do is essentially do a heavy dry brush. Yellow's a horrible colour to try and paint with anyway, to try and get it even. Best thing to do is come in with a dry brush and basically do a very heavy dry brush. So I think hopefully I've got enough paint to sort of get by. So I'll just take off a good portion of the excess. Now let's test it on the trousers here, and let's see. Yeah, I think that's doable. It's probably going to need a couple of coats. Hopefully that will sort of be about the colour that I think I need. So, as I say, I don't know if all Avalon Sunset is as bad as that, or if that was a particularly bad vintage, particularly bad year. But yeah, I'll struggle through, see it best I can. Next up, I have mixed up a combination of these three colours to try and make myself a pale yellow. So this is going to go across the parts that aren't necessarily the same colour as this dark yellow. It's kind of a mix of two different colours. So hopefully this will go on a bit easier than that last yellow went on. But again, as it's a yellow, as it's a very light colour, it's going to need a couple of coats. Okay, and there is all the yellow done. Now that wasn't fun, you've probably picked up by now I'm not a fan of yellow, so let's get some easier colours on there. So I'm going to do some Macragge blue now. So this is going to go across the chest, across here. It's also going to go across the straps on the back, following down here, and finally across the boots here. Next up, I have mixed a little bit of Mephiston red with a touch of Jacaro orange, just to brighten up that red a little bit, because the problem I find with a lot of Citadel paints is they're quite dark colours, really and truly. So I need to go out and find a brighter orange, but in the meantime I will just mix up my own. So this is going to go across the top piece, across there, all of this section, and there's a couple of dots on the boots as well. Mournfang brown now, and this is across the belt and also across the boots on the model. Okay, so after the brown is applied, this is what we're looking like. So the bottom half is pretty much done. I'm going to come in and do some bit more detail at a later stage, but what I'm going to do now is concentrate on the skin. So for this, I have mixed up essentially 1 part Mournfang brown to 2 parts Steel Legion drab, and that's given me quite a close colour, I think, to what we see in the show. So just the case now of applying this. Get it in focus. Yeah, applying this colour all over the skin. Next I'm going to take black and obviously paint in the hair, and I'm also going to paint in things like the eyebrows, and I might do a few black lines just to perhaps down the side here to split out the yellow a little bit. Next it's on to Corax white, and this is for the gloves and the hat. So once this white is on, I think that's most of the base colours down. Now that white is now all applied, and I have just jumped forward a couple of steps. I painted in the red and the blue on the hat with the same colours I've used before. I did a very light blue on the wrists on each hand, and I painted in just the white of the eyes and the teeth there. Actually, one other thing I did, I just did a sort of stipple effect of a lighter blue over the chest armour there, because I just felt that it was missing something. So what I'm going to do now is mix in some gunmetal with Runefang steel, just to try and create a slightly shinier silver. And I'm going to go in and paint the buckle down here and the badge. Next up is the gun, and for that I have mixed up equal parts of Dawnstone, Administratum Grey and Macragge Blue. Essentially I'm trying to create a bluey grey, funnily enough. So I think I've just about got the right mixture I need. Trouble is, when you mix colours, you've always got to make sure that you've mixed up enough on your palette. You don't want to run out of paint. Now this colour is quite close to the colour I used actually on the gun of 3030s, but I didn't want it. I just want a slightly different hue, so hopefully I've got that. Next up is a mix of Trollsail Orange and Chikara Orange, and this is going to go across just a small detail on either side of the gun, just across here. Probably going to need at least 2 coats of this. While I'm waiting for that first coat to dry, I'm just going to put a bit of red on the front here. So I've been looking at the model and I'm not entirely happy with the colour that I've used for the skin. I think I've gone too dark. So I've been playing around with mixing up some colours, and I think surprisingly the colours I'm going to actually mix up to get the skin colour is about 2/3 Mornfang Brown to 1/3 Chikara Orange. And I think having mixed that together, that is a bit closer than what I had before. So it might look a bit stark as it goes on, but I think... Now again, it looks a little bit orange under certain light, but I think it'll be better than what I've got. So I'm going to go ahead and paint in the rest of the face, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, I don't know if that's coming across on the camera, but that's definitely made a big difference. So I'm pleased I've done that. I think that's definitely much closer to what it should have been. Okay, last little job, well, on the face at least, is to dot in the eyes. So they're pretty simple for these models, so I'm just going to use a dark brown, and then I'll probably just do a dot of white in the corner. And that's the eyes all taken care of. So pretty much every colour is done now. So what I'm going to do, I threatened this before but I didn't actually do it, is I'm going to do exactly like I did with Deputy Fuzz, is do this sort of black lining. So just to sort of bring out the cartoony look of it. So I'm going to be fairly selective as to sort of the areas I do this. Essentially I'm just going to run black into the creases around the model. So, sorry, I might have gone a bit out of focus there. Just like that, only I'll have to do it all the way across. The legs have got quite a lot of detail to bring out, so that would be a bit simpler. But yeah, it's just a case of taking time a little bit. Steady hand, and I think it just, I say, it just helps with that sort of cartoon look, and brings out the definition a little bit more. And with that black panel lining, is what I'm going to call it, the model is done. So quite a bit down on the legs, around the back, and yeah, just sort of did the shoulders and across the chest. So that's it now, so I'm going to stick him on the base and I'll show you the final result. And here we have the finished complete diorama. So as you can see, I did a more realistic style on the base. That's kind of to represent the cartoons really, where the painted backgrounds are always a lot more realistic than the characters. But it really makes the characters pop. So I'll just spin him around a little bit. Now I haven't glued any of these pieces down yet, so that is a job I need to do. I also need to varnish Bravestarr and Deputy Fuzz. So yeah, 3030 is leaning back a little bit because he needs to be properly put into position and glued down. But yeah, the three of them are on there pretty close together really. There's not much space between them all. But it's a nice diorama because you get the characters are all looking in different directions, so depending on how you turn it, you get quite a nice different look, unique look each time. So just to wrap things up, I'll just finish on a bit of self-promotion, housekeeping. I've actually just recently created a Instagram account, so I'm actually entering into the modern world a little bit. You can find that at Daydreamer Design 3D. Had to think for a second then. In the description down below, I'll post the link to it. From there, I'll be posting sort of pictures, progress, updates, that kind of thing, so you'll get a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes type of look, if that's what you're after. Going forward, I want to carry on. I think the next model I've got lined up is going to be another 80s cartoon model. So if you want to see that, then please subscribe. Please like, drop a comment, all that type of stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.